Assalamualaikum and good morning, doctor. Today I am presenting attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or also known as ADHD for short. This is the table of contents where I will be talking about definition of ADHD, how does the impairment develop, the symptoms, linguistic theories, specifically speech act theory, the cooperative principle, and relevance theory. What is ADHD? We only know what it stands for, but what is it really? So, based on DSM-5, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder defined by impairing levels of inattention, disorganization, and/or hyperactivity impulsivity. Inattention and disorganization entail inability to stay on task, seeming not to listen, and losing materials at levels that are inconsistent with age or developmental level. Hyperactivity impulsivity entails overactivity, fidgeting, inability to stay seated, intruding into other people's activities, and inability to wait, symptoms that are excessive for age or developmental age. In childhood, ADHD frequently overlaps with disorders that are often considered to be quote unquote externalizing disorders, such as oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. ADHD often persists into adulthood with resultant impairments of social, academic, and occupational functioning. How does the impairment develop? According to Farawan et al., it is the accumulation of genetic and environmental factors such as high polygenic risk, which can be explained as many genetic variants, each small effect but combined increase the risk. Rare genetic mutation, exposure to toxins such as high blood lead levels, use of acetaminophen or common pain reliever and fever, deprivation, stress, infection, poverty, and trauma. According to Brights, neurobiological dysfunctions affect the dynamic of the neural network responsible for the receptive, integrative, and expressive language structure in different child neurodevelopment levels. The symptoms and cognitive behavioral changes of ADHD are the results of abnormalities in several neuronal connections, both cortical and subcortical, which lead to dysfunction in one or more brain regions at the same time. Most affected and described connections mainly involve anterior cingulate gyrus, prefrontal cortex, amygdala, striatum, and ventral integumentary area, both voluntary and involuntary regions of attention that regulate intensity and support of attentional focus. Regions are interconnected by the action of dopaminergic and noradrenergic neurotransmitters, and their deficits also contribute to lowering the attentional functional of ADHD. Symptoms of ADHD are focused on three areas, which are inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Inattention manifests behaviorally in ADHD, while hyperactivity refers to excessive motor activity, and impulsivity refers to hasty actions that occur in the moment without forethought and that have high potential for harm to the individual. ADHD can lead to three major functional deficits: 1. Executive attention deficit, 2. Operational memory problems, 3. Self engagement in sequential tasks without reward. Executive attention is responsible for the ability to increase the degree of sensitivity, directing the brain perceptions and persisting in these analysis, being able to verify the details and the most significant information of any task. It includes selective, sustained, alternating, divided, covered, and spatial attention and is able to manage focal points according to time, space, and priorities. It depends on the connection integrity of frontal areas with the anterior and striated or subcortical cingulate region. Executive functioning refers to self-regulatory behaviors necessary to select and sustain actions and guide the behavior within the context of goals and rules. Executive functioning involves developing and implementing an approach to performing a task that is not habitually performed. One must initiate, plan, shift attention or thought, organize, inhibit inappropriate thought or behavior, and sustain the necessary sequence of behavior. Prior conceptualizations of ADHD as a primary problem of attention or impulsivity are losing their explanatory and prescriptive power and are being replaced with constructs including poor self-regulation, particularly behavioral inhibition, and working memory deficits that underlie executive functioning. They have difficulty stopping a dominant response or the urge to act, interrupting an ongoing pattern of behavior that is producing signs of being ineffective, and protecting periods of concentration and self regulation from being disrupted by both outside and inside sources of interference. There are four components of effective functioning: one, nonverbal working memory; two, verbal working memory; three, regulation of affect, arousal, and motivation; and four, the ability to recombine behavioral sequences in novel, hierarchically organized, goal directed behaviors. These four executive functions permit motor control and fluency, affording effective self-regulation and adaptive functioning that direct and control the motor system so as to achieve a particular goal. Operational or working memory is the ability to immediately memorize sequential information to fully accomplish it without forgetting the most important, decisive priority details and those that require data from other axes of knowledge, seeking to align them with those already memorized. It depends on the integrity of frontal regions with amygdala, hippocampus, striatal connections. Executive functioning depends on working memory, which involves short-term storage as well as processing, manipulation, and transformation of stored information. STM, or short-term memory, involves storage of information for a limited period of time and reproduction of that information. Working memory serves as a workbench. It brings together the present contents of STM, retrieved or activated long-term memory (LTM), and further goals and plans. Text comprehension requires efficient working memory because the listener or reader must process the language online while retrieving information from LTM and building a mental model for the text that is a representation of the situation or world, real or imaginary, described in the text. Students with ADHD only also exhibit deficits in monitoring what they are reading. They fail to notice inconsistencies in text or to monitor ongoing comprehension of what they are reading. This failure to monitor is due to deficits they exhibit in executive functioning and affects their ability to inhibit inappropriate behaviors, to plan and to develop and to maintain mental representation of tasks and goals. Nonverbal or spatial working memory is the capacity to hold events and information in mind to imitate complex sequences of behaviors. The use of nonverbal working memory to activate past sensory events allows for hindsight and forethought. Verbal working memory is internalized language that is used to talk with oneself to provide reflection, description, instruction, and questioning, which in turn facilitate problem solving, the development of rules, and moral reasoning. ADHD disrupts the development of internalization of speech because it interrupts the inhibition needed to support internalized speech. Without internalized speech, one will fail to develop appreciation of rule governed behavior, and without this, one lacks self regulation. Deficits in verbal working memory will contribute to difficulties in regulating affect, motivation, and arousal. Both verbal and nonverbal memory are essential for problem solving that involves recombination. Self-engagement in sequential tasks without reward is the energetic amount of self-effort and intention undertook to fully and correctly fulfill a specific activity, task, or request without a greater motivation, or which represents a routine, rule, or command by an authority or institution. It can also be called cognitive self-regulation, and it depends on connections between regions of prefrontal cortex with the striatum, ventral regions of the anterior cingulate cortex, amygdala, and ventral tegmental nucleus. Here are at least 7 ADHD symptoms present in the DSM-5, which are indicative of problems associated with communication and language. 1. Does not seem to hear when talking directly to him or her. 2. Difficulty in carefully following instructions. They are also less likely to use organization rules and strategies in their performance of memory tasks, and they are less likely to transfer the rules they have acquired on prior tasks to a new task. 3. Rush to answer before the questions are even finished. 4. Interrupts or intrudes on the conversation of others. 5. Difficulty in waiting for dialogue shifts. 6. Speaks excessively and without self-control. 7. Difficulty in playing silently. As a result of their executive function deficits, children with ADHD seem to have more troubling doing what they know rather than knowing what they do. They seem to lack self-talk critical to the control and organization of interpersonal behavior. As a consequence, they do not read essential verbal, nonverbal, and situational cues or make decisions based on that evidence in accordance with social expectation. Just for extra information, other than knowing deeply the signs and symptoms of ADHD and knowing how to correlate the neurobiology and neuropsychology of ADHD with speech therapy assessment, tracking the child's neurodevelopmental early signs of ADHD and possible effects of ADHD on the child's speech and language can be a preventive measure as well, as demonstrated by the table. Linguistic theory. First one is speech act theory. Austin described the speech act theory as the actions performed when utterance is produced. There are three levels, which are locutionary acts, the form of the words uttered; two, illocutionary act, the intended meaning or force behind the utterance, indicating the speaker's communicative intention; three, perlocutionary act, the effect the utterance has on the listener. How can understanding speech act theory help us understand the impairment? One would be impulsivity and communication. Individuals with ADHD might struggle with impulsivity, which could affect their ability to organize and control speech acts effectively. They might blurt out words without fully considering the implications or intended meaning, leading to misunderstandings or unintended illocutionary acts. 2. Inattention and miscommunication. Inattention, a core symptom of ADHD, can lead to difficulties in processing and attending to social cues during communication. This may result in mis-elocutionary intentions from the speaker or misinterpretation of perlocutionary effects, contributing to communication breakdowns. 3. Hyperactivity and social interaction. Hyperactivity in ADHD may manifest as excessive movement or restlessness during social interactions, potentially disrupting the flow of conversation or making it challenging to engage in turn taking during speech acts. Next, the cooperative principle. It is believed to be the implicit assumptions that underlie effective communication between speaker and listeners, with aim of cooperatively achieving mutual understanding. This includes maxims of conversations, which comprises of 1. Maxim of quality, which provide information that is true and corresponds to reality. 2. Maxim of quantity, be informative, information neither too little or too much. 3. Maxim of relation, information that is relevant to previous utterances. 4. Maxim of manner, be brief, concise, and orderly, avoid obscurity and ambiguity. Individuals with ADHD may violate maxims due to their impulsivity and inattention. Individuals with ADHD may provide excessive or irrelevant information, which violates maxim of quantity and relation. Impulsive statements without considering evidence, so violates maxim of quality, or exhibit disorganized and ambiguous speech patterns, which violates maxim of manner. Lastly, the relevance theory. This theoretical framework unveils the cognitive processes underlying language use and comprehension and the way individuals navigate the complexities of linguistic interaction. Speakers aim to convey meaning effectively and efficiently in communication contexts. An input is relevant to an individual when its processing in a context of available assumptions yields a positive cognitive effect. The most important type of cognitive effect achieved by processing an input in a context is a contextual implication, a conclusion deducible from the input and the context together, but from neither input or context alone. Relevance theory claims that what makes an input worth picking out from the mass of competing stimuli is not just that it is relevant, but that it is more relevant than any alternative input available to us at that time. What makes an input worth picking out from the mass of competing stimuli is not just the cognitive effects it achieves, but knowing of the tendency to pick out the most relevant stimuli in the environment and process them to maximize their relevance, to prompt the retrieval of certain contextual assumptions, and to point to an intended conclusion. Inferential communication, which includes ostensive inferential communication. So this would comprise of the informative intention, the intention to inform an audience of something, the communicative intention, which is the intention to inform the audience of one's informative intention. Ostensive inferential communication involves the use of ostensive stimulus designed to attract an audience attention and focus it on the communicator's meaning. Relevance theory claims that use of ostensive stimulus may create precise and predictable expectations of relevance not raised by other stimuli. Relevance theory emphasizes the role of cognitive processes in communication, highlighting how individuals actively process and interpret incoming information to derive meaning. Individuals with ADHD may experience difficulties in cognitive processing, such as attention deficits, working memory impairments, and executive function deficits, or executive dysfunction, which can affect their ability to organize information and sustain focus from being disrupted by both outside and inside sources of interference. Relevance theory emphasizes the role of inferential processes in deriving meaning from communication, whereby listeners actively infer the intended meaning of utterances based on contextual cues and background knowledge. Individuals with ADHD may encounter challenges in inferential processing, such as difficulties in connecting different pieces of information and integrating new information with existing knowledge structures. This is the reference list. That is all from me. Thank you for listening.